This case went unsolved for 27 years, and it wasn't until 2022 that investigators were able to link a DNA match to solve the case. Just a warning, this does have to do with SA and crimes against children. On June 7, 1995, 14-year-old Nicole Smith was walking to the bus stop in Atlanta, Georgia. Some sources say she was walking with her sister, and other sources say that she was walking with her friends. Nicole realized that she was missing an assignment, so she decided she was going to go back home and grab it. Nicole decided to take a popular shortcut through some woods, but unfortunately, she never made it home. 2 security guards working nearby heard a series of gunshots. They ran towards the noise and discovered Nicole's body. She had been beaten, essayed, and shot twice in the face. She was quickly identified by the things found in her backpack. And Nicole's mother later recalled that she heard those gunshots because Nicole was not far from her home when she was killed. Unfortunately, Nicole's case went cold until it was reopened 7 years later in 2002 by Detective Vincent Velasquez. In 2004, detectives received a lead that 13-year-old Betty Brown was essayed in nearby East Point, Georgia. The DNA found from Betty's case matched the DNA that was found on Nicole's body. Detective Velasquez conducted hundreds of interviews and took over 50 blood samples and still had no luck finding the perpetrator. In 2017, he retired and passed the case on to Detective Scott Demister. Scott used genealogy and ancestry databases, and it took 3 years to find a person of interest, but in December of 2021, a match was made. 49-year-old Kelvin Arnold was identified as a match to DNA found on both Betty and Nicole. Unfortunately, investigators found out that he had died earlier that year in August. Nicole's mother said in an interview that the moment was bittersweet and that she's fighting to take one day at a time. Betty Brown is now grown with kids of her own, and she said she has hidden this part of her life for years. She never thought she'd see the day where she would be speaking about the assault. She said in an interview, "I'm not okay with the situation on how long it took us to get here, but I'm happy that we are finally here and that he is no longer out there able to do these things that he did to me and Nicole and to others." Detectives have not been able to link Arnold to any other crimes, and it is reported that he did not have a criminal record. It is reported that Betty Brown and Nicole's mother still keep in touch.
Let's talk about the Cecil Hotel. This hotel has a reputation for being one of the most haunted, horror-filled, death-filled hotels in Los Angeles. It was built in 1927. During this time, Los Angeles was a very popular area. There were trains coming through. It was near a train station, and it was very low prices, so those people could stay there. A few years later, the Great Depression hit, and the area that the Cecil Hotel was in was named Skid Row. Now, Skid Row became an area where homeless people lived, around 8,000, I believe. People were dropped off there after being released from prison and mental institutions. So a bunch of criminals, killers, including Richard Ramirez, drug users and drug dealers stayed at this hotel. In the 1930s, there were 6 reported suicides. I do a little trigger warning before I really get in. I'm going to be mentioning some pretty brutal deaths, so just to let you know. People would ingest poison there, shoot themselves in the head, throw themselves out of the window. In 1934, Louis D. Borden, an army surgeon who was staying there, slashed his throat with a razor. Again, this is going to be very disturbing. 1944, 19-year-old Dorothy Purcell awoke in the middle of the night with very bad stomach pains. She went to the bathroom and, to her shock, gave birth to a baby. In her mind, she thought it was stillborn, that it had not survived. So she threw the baby out of the window. She did an autopsy on the baby, and it was actually alive. So, like I mentioned in the Elisa Lam video, a surplus of serial killers actually stayed there, including Richard Ramirez. It was reported that he would go there, take off his bloody clothes, and then walk up to the top floor, and there were 15 floors in this hotel. He would walk up covered in his bloody underwear, and it was normal. That was a normal thing to see in this hotel. No one said anything, no one reported it, and Richard thought this was like his home. There was another Australian serial killer that stayed there named Jack Unterweger, and he also thought the Cecil Hotel was his home as well. In 2007, a new owner decided she wanted to renovate the place, make it a place where tourists could stay for a low price, and she named it the Stay on Main Hotel. And the Stay on Main Hotel had its own kind of lobby. There were people who stayed in the Cecil Hotel, like rented out the rooms. It was like the first few floors were for the tenants that lived there, the next 3 floors were the Stay on Main Hotel, and the rest were the Cecil Hotel. So the people who were staying in the Cecil Hotel, like the criminals, the drug users, and etc., could come across to the people staying in the Stay on Main Hotel through the elevators. And then the whole Elisa Lam case happened. Go watch my other video if you want to hear about that. But yeah, this hotel has a terrifying reputation, so.
Did you guys hear about the couple that tortured and killed their au pair? Sophie Lynette was a 20-year-old French woman who wanted to work as an au pair in England so that she could learn English. A lot of people take on au pair positions for this reason. It's when you live with a family and take care of their kids while also learning their customs and language. She got a position working for Sabrina Quater and Wissam Madouni. They were French nationals that lived near London, and everything seemed to be going great at first. But little did Sophie know, Sabrina had a very delusional and violent side of her. Sabrina ruled her household with an iron fist and hardly paid Sophie. Sim was very submissive to his wife, which is typically fine, but Sabrina began to abuse Sophie. Neighbors noticed that Sophie seemed stressed and sad, and she had also lost a lot of weight. This is a photo taken just days before she died. Sabrina had withheld food and taken away Sophie's ID and cell phone so that she couldn't contact her family. Sabrina got it into her head that her au pair was in cahoots with her ex-boyfriend Mark Walton. Sabrina was convinced that Sophie would get up in the middle of the night and let Mark into their house so that he could abuse their children. And her husband eventually started to believe her. And to be clear, Mark Walton didn't even live in England at the time, and he had no idea who Sophie was. Over a period of several months, the couple beat Sophie, whipped her with extension cords, and then waterboarded her in their bathtub. On Sabrina's phone, they found that she actually recorded some of these interrogations, although the actual audio is not public. It wasn't until neighbors noticed black smoke and a foul odor coming from the couple's backyard. Firefighters showed up and they noticed that chicken was on the grill, but there was also a large fire next to the grill. Upon further inspection, they noticed a pair of glasses as well as human fingers and a nose. Sabrina and Sim had killed Sophie, but there was no way to tell for sure exactly how she died. The autopsy showed that she'd been beaten severely, and she had several cracked ribs and even a cracked sternum, which I guess means that they stepped on her chest. Because of her inflated lungs, they think that her cause of death was drowning. Both of them were sentenced to 30 years to life behind bars.
Woman was buried alive by her husband. This happened in Washington when 42-year-old young Ann called police using her Apple Watch after her husband beat her and duct taped her mouth. During the 911 call, Young is heard screaming before her husband broke her Apple Watch, threw her in his van, and drove off. Video surveillance captured Che Ann driving out of the garage at the same time that police arrived to the home. Che Ann took his wife to a wooded area, stabbed her in the chest, and buried her alive in a shallow grave. She had a very hard time breathing when she was in there, but she was able to finally get out several hours later and ran to the nearest home and asked for help. It was said that their fight started because they were talking about divorce and finances. Che Ann was charged with attempted first-degree murder, domestic violence, and kidnapping.